Oh, isn't that cute? And the lesson isn't as long as it seems. Millions of children are working in sweatshops worldwide. How would you make sense of this as an economist, and what solutions can you offer for it? So pause and jot down your answers before you proceed. Think of a traditional family where the wife is a homemaker and the husband works outside. This is a form of specialization which is really cool and has many other examples. Let's see how economics can provide insight into how this became the norm for most human history and even today in most parts of the world. So we need to make some simplifications here, but the model works. A person can work either at home or in the market. So let's say the home production includes nursing children as well as cooking and cleaning, and market production is paid work, but could also include hunting and farming. So we're going to use simple numbers. Let's say if the wife works 1 week only at home, she can make 20 units, or if she works only in the market, she can make 20 units there. So you can think of the 20 units in the market as, let's say, $20 or whatever. So you might be like, what's going on with these units? These are anything of value aggregated into one index. So you can think of it as a weighted average. You could have any definition, but as long as you're consistent, then you can compare. All right, now what about the husband? The husband in 1 week can make either 10 units in home or 20 units in the market. Remember opportunity cost? That's the choice each person must make. But since they're married, the family will get the total payoff. So they're gonna try to make a joint decision. Now notice that the wife is more productive at home. That should be obvious because that includes childbearing and rearing. By the way, in societies where most of the works are physical labor or there are frequent wars, then the husband will likely be more productive out of home than the wife. That would only reinforce the kind of lesson I want to give here. So if you want, you could change you could either reduce the wife's market production or increase the husband. It wouldn't make a difference overall. Now, what is the most rational thing for them to do? Let's say initially they decide to split, right, to be fair. So each of them would work half of the week at home and half in the market, right? So you get 10, 10, 5, 10. And that would give us a total. So total is the family's total output for home and for the market. So that is one option. Now the other option is to specialize, right? So this is an important thing. Since the husband is kind of lousy at home, let him concentrate in the market. And you might want to write this down. Specialization means concentrate in what you are relatively good at and then trade it with the other side. Now this is kind of like relative to what you have to sacrifice, and we're going to look at that later. So let's say the husband doesn't work at home but only works at the market, and he can make 20 in that week. And then you can notice that right now we have matched the market production that we had before. So we can say, okay, the wife can focus at home. And then you get the totals of 20, which matches the initial 20, and 20, which is more than the 15. Right? So if you want, you could also say that the wife works only 15 at home and then puts 5 into market, then you get more of market. Either way, what happens is that through a specialization, their joint production can increase, right? So by dividing the work, the entire family is better off. Now you can see why family becomes a value in traditional societies. Children are taught from young age about marital fidelity because these values help them succeed in the future given the realities on the ground. In other words, morality, religion, and social institutions are closely tied to the economic situation that people face. Marx and Engels got that one right. So this is also called division of labor, kind of like an assembly line where each person does a single task very fast instead of doing everything, and we all benefit from it and we all do it. You don't grow your own food and clothes and everything. Instead, each person focuses in one area, becomes really good at it, then they trade with others, and overall everyone will be better off. So trade increases efficiency. And this happens because of economies of scale, right? So one example of that is having twins, where the cost of twins is less than the cost of two separate kids. But this is also true about any number of kids. Having a second or third child won't double or triple the costs. It's less than that. And in traditional families with many kids, the kids would actually look after each other after a certain age. So you can check this with your parents, they'll have a lot to tell you. And you can also think of forming a family as a form of saving on costs. So instead of two people living alone, then you have a family which overall saves on the costs. So pause here, record the slide number, and summarize it. Now you might be like, hang on, how does all this work? Who should specialize in what? We need to look at another cool concept here, which is comparative advantage, and the backbone of it is opportunity cost. So the wife here has a one-to-one opportunity cost. For every unit of home production, she must sacrifice 1 unit of market production and vice versa. For the husband, it's 2 versus 0.5. Now compare their opportunity costs for the home production. One is sacrificing 1 unit of market, the other one is sacrificing 2 units of market for each unit of home. And this is where you get the concept of comparative advantage. And you can do the same thing for market production. The opportunity cost of home production is lower for the wife. That's where she has comparative advantage. And the opportunity cost of market production is lower for the husband. That's where he has comparative advantage. Now, this is super important. Pay attention. Comparative advantage is not the same as productivity. In this case, they're both equally productive in the market. Sometimes one is more productive in both areas, but it is impossible to have comparative advantage in both areas because of the way it's set up. Comparative advantage is not about how good we are in a certain area. It's about how bad the other side is. It's a relative measure. Let's say we're really good in market production. If the other side really sucks at home production, they will still have comparative advantage in market relative to us. Which means we can jointly do better if they concentrate on the market and we take care of home. Not because we're so good at it, but because their home effort would be a waste of time and resources. One may have absolute advantage in both goods, but not comparative advantage in both, because comparative advantage is defined by opportunity cost. This is called gains from trade. It's a form of free lunch, because without trade, we are inefficient, right? So that's the meaning of a non-zero sum game and the concept of gains from trade. And this is how our entire society is structured. When you go to university, you specialize in 1 or 2 areas at most. And the more advanced you get, the narrower becomes your field of study. Now, some of you may be like, oh no, I don't want to narrow it down. But don't be so upset about it, because you can earn greater returns by becoming an expert in one field and then trading it with others. This is why for most of human history, women have specialized in home and men in the market. Remember again, economics doesn't say that this is good or fair or it should happen. It's not about value judgments. It's about understanding why something happened. What were the forces which sustained it? So when we come across these facts, let's not get so bitter and upset. It's not because the society is backward or oppressive. This is a very rational allocation of scarce resources given the prospects at hand. It only makes sense that rational agents specialize in the area with the greatest return for them. And this is also why families in such societies tend to invest more in the formal education of their sons than their daughters. Or the sons and daughters receive different curricula. So the girls are often trained in home economics and arts, but not so much in math or business. And the girls themselves choose not to pursue those disciplines exactly because they are rational. They see that in their society, it's not their advantage to do so. And by the way, the dynamics of trade are equally applicable to all transactions at the individual level as well as international trade by countries. Now, a common idea that you hear a lot is buy Canadian, with a lot of praise around it. But sorry, this is a fallacy. It's not really a good idea to say that, oh, go and buy local, because it stifles our comparative advantage. We grow not by doing everything ourselves, but by specializing in a few areas and then getting the rest cheaply from others. If we insist that all our food or clothes should be made here, then it means we are investing a lot of resources into these industries. But those resources could have been used to give us a competitive edge in areas where we are more efficient. There is no free lunch. Buying local is not even good for the environment because we can't possibly make everything local. Given the reality of scarcity, it's only a few things at most which can be produced locally. There is no pride in making our own food when it requires sacrificing many other things which could have been produced more efficiently. So watch out, these slogans have an appealing appearance, but they're flawed and superficial These slogans serve two main purposes. One is publicity for politicians, and two is favoritism and additional rent for individual industries who benefit from them. And at this point, you shouldn't fall for them. All right, so pause here and take good notes on this. These are advanced concepts like comparative advantage and specialization. So what I want you to do is write down the two tables from the last slide, and better yet is to do your own example. Make up your own numbers and do your own table and the opportunity cost calculations and find the comparative advantage. Wow, that was cool. What was the cause of the baby boom in the mid 20th century? Conventional wisdom says, well, because we came out of the Great Depression, people were more optimistic, men came back from war, and women were no longer recruited in factories. Sorry, that doesn't fit the data. If that were the case, it should have only been a postponement of fertility, not a boom in completed fertility. Besides, the years don't match the hypothesis in terms of when it started and when it ended, and the fertility age of the women involved in it. And also, neutral countries also had a baby boom, like Ireland, Sweden, and Switzerland. Oh, isn't she cute? So what was going on? The best explanation is technology, which reduced the cost of home production, including babies. But technology also had another important effect. Pre-technology, in a traditional society, most work is very physical. That's why men get to command more resources since they have comparative advantage in manual work. But technology primarily replaces the most manual work and instead requires skills to run those machines. This makes the field a more level ground. So if we care about gender equality, the more innovation and more technological progress will be our savior. Pause here and take notes. Beginning in the 1920s, home appliances became increasingly more available, which reduced the work needed at home. Also, medical technology exploded, and by the law of demand, we know that when something becomes more affordable, people do more of it. But those machines also require technicians and skilled workers, so the return on skilled work increased, so being out of the labor force became a greater sacrifice. So initially, people invested in the quantity of their kids. That was the beginning of the boom. Later on, they started having less kids but invest more in their education. That's the quality. This is the best explanation we have for the emancipation of women. It also explains why students of your age today have less sex than 50 years ago. It's because of higher returns on human capital. Having sex means risking those returns. It has a high opportunity cost. You are making a rational decision. And because of those higher returns, people started investing more to extend their lives. Medicine advances more in a society where it pays more to live longer. Technology also helps explain why marriage rates have dropped. It's because people now have other options. It's possible for adults to live alone. More options, not just for women, but for all sexes. And once the alternative is available, social norms change accordingly, where marriage or marital commitment is no longer a high value. So the fact that people are living alone more is not because humanity is degenerating. We are no less moral today than 100 years ago. It's just that they didn't have that option. Marriage was the only path open to them. It had the highest expected value of prosperity and survival. Now it has other competitors. By the way, this is a very good book by a sociologist for you to read. Part of the drop in marriage rates is also because of postponement. The average age of marriage has risen by over 6 years over the past 5 decades because of the higher returns on education. Yeah, you might be like, hang on, what about divorce? Now that's kind of tricky. On the one hand, the cost of divorce has dropped because living alone is quite feasible, but technology also enables better matching. People get married not out of necessity, but because they find it rewarding. So the data shows a drop in marriage rates, but marriages have not become less stable. Divorce rates don't show a significant change. Pause here for notes. Single mothers are among the most fragile members of the society economically, partly because they face a high opportunity cost for professional development. This is more dramatic among racial minorities and lower income women. The main cause for the increase in single-headed households is the technological change that we covered, but there's more. The welfare state has good intentions, but it has unintended consequences. Remember, people respond to incentives, and government support reduces the incentive to marry or to remain married. Now, the number of female-headed families has been growing faster than government support programs, so that couldn't be the only cause. Paid leave is similar to parental leave but includes more items and needs. Its purpose is to empower women so that they don't have to choose between their job and their family. And it is offered to both couples to be fair. But even when it's equally available to both parents, it's predominantly used by women. We see exactly the same pattern of women specializing in home now in the modern society when they have full choice and there is all this equality. And that shouldn't be a surprise, but it has its consequences. It hampers their accumulation of human capital. And because of that, those countries with a more generous parental leave have a lower percentage of women in managerial positions. And this is not just about single mothers. Another explanation for the change in fertility and gender roles is infant mortality. If survival is at stake, then it makes sense that women would dedicate themselves for breeding. But that's not satisfactory because why did they go all the way to 5 and 6 kids after seeing that the first couple survived? Besides, the fertility drop began in early 1800s, almost a century before infant mortality drops. Nor was it because of birth control, because modern birth control came even later. How about government laws about equality and support programs? Those also came much after the fertility drop. Sexual revolution, by the way, refers to attitudes, culture, laws, and social norms, and all of those evolve with technology. I love that picture, by the way. So what you can think of a diagram where technological growth is really the main thing. This is the main cause, and it induces evolution in our norms and values, and those in turn can demand new technological improvement based on the new situation that evolves. It's heartrending to see what millions of children and adults are going through in developing countries. The root problem is poverty, and the real solution is if they can generate more income. What we know is that as income goes up, birth rate drops because of the opportunity cost, and families start sending their kids to school because of the higher returns on education. Parents in general want their kids to be educated. If they're not doing it, it's because the option is not available to them. Now, how can these poor families and nations be empowered so they rise in income? The answer is look at their assets and what they're good at. The low wages in these countries are exactly what they can capitalize on in the international markets. That's not something to be upset about. That's the only way they can pull themselves up. Now, there is a tragic aspect to this image, but this itself can be their way out of it. The problem itself can give rise to the solution. So sweatshops are not a cause of low wages, but a way out of it. And of course, there's a lot of room for improvement, but eradicating sweatshops is not the solution. So what I want to say here is that often sweatshops are presented as part of the problem, as the cause. What I want to say is that they could actually be part of the solution as an intermediate step. What helps them is more foreign direct investment by letting capital flow into these countries. So let the low wages there attract foreign funds. It will empower them in the long run and allow them to go to school. Remember, trade benefits both sides. And you can think of sweatshops as lifeboats. Far from perfect, but better than nothing. Remember, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. Let's be realistic, not perfectionist. And remember again, the bottom line of economic development is human capital. But they won't invest in it when the returns on it are so low. And the returns increase through a specialization. The more we trade with them, the more they'll have the wherewithal to send their kids to schools. Pause and take notes. Before we blame anyone else for sweatshops, let's realize that we are supporting, funding, and fueling these practices by purchasing the products. Most people prefer a lower price over almost any other consideration, especially ethical standards. And that's the idea behind boycotting. Consumer sovereignty is the idea that one who pays the piper calls the tune. Consumers vote with their dollars. When someone doesn't buy animal products or GMO or Nike or whatever, they're downvoting these products. And once the critical mass is built, sellers will have the incentive to change their practices because they're losing popularity and profit. That's the logic behind boycotting, but it's a bit superficial and not very effective. Another solution that sometimes they give is having trade barriers and tariffs. But again, the idea is that these things will not help the poor people there because they can't even trade at all and they cannot specialize. The idea of a living wage is itself a subtle form of ethnocentric colonization because we're applying our own standards to people who are facing a different reality. And labor unions, they're beneficial to their local members at the expense of other locals, and they reduce their comparative advantage. If you care about lasting solutions, you must be very sensitive about any concentration of power. Government protection laws, like license requirements and minimum wage, they all reinforce the concentration of power in one way or another. These are at most treating the symptoms. Whenever it speaks against something, you must immediately ask, what's your alternative? These sweatshops, despite all their limitations, are a relative safe haven for those children. It's not like they're gonna go to school if there are no sweatshops. It will be even worse for them. The people in these countries compete to get into sweatshops because it's a relatively better option for them. And that's why campaigns against sweatshops harm the very people they're intended to help. Sweatshops in developing countries are similar to 19th century England, and this comparison can be quite insightful. The working and living conditions in London at the time were awful compared to our standards today, but that was a great improvement compared to what they had as an alternative at the time. Those who flocked away from the farms and countryside to the cities were rationally choosing the better alternative. Why should we despise or pity them for making life better for themselves or their families? And we must be patient. It took the West 2 centuries to get to where we are from this Industrial Revolution. Our desire for immediate improvement often stifles long-term development. That's the trade-off. Once again, there is no free lunch. Human rights and fair trade also take up scarce resources. They may be ideal, but they're not feasible. Pause. Wow, that was cool. A recent development that's quite promising is the platform economy. It's really an amazing idea which has provided jobs and income for millions of people and enhanced the quality of life. The best example for it is Uber. It has even become a term. In 5 years since its start, Uber's value grew to $50 billion. Now, this is no promotion for Uber, but we want to see what is their business model, what was their success, and what's so promising from the economics perspective. So here's a definition. Platforms facilitate exchange. They bring people together in a very efficient manner, powered by cheap telecommunication, data storage centers, and algorithms to analyze big data. And here's a bunch of other examples. There are also some classical ones like Facebook, Amazon, Google, YouTube, Wikipedia. So write down your own examples when you take notes. These platforms are a good model for, oh, that's so cool, for a free competitive market. They are efficient. Now, such innovations get to set the standards and gain reputation, and they grow exponentially through a network of users. Another example is cryptocurrency. The more people use it, the more likely it is to fly as a currency. Using any new software or means of communication is like that. Its value and efficiency depends on how many people use it. And it has an embedded quality control system. And that's exactly what you want, that the very self-interest of people, of the buyers and sellers, prevents them from abuse. That's the invisible hand which directs the market. This is a great alternative to top-down government regulation, which is intended to ensure quality. Because government regulation limits competition, and that's why big corporations love it so much. Oh no, what have you done? A potential concern is if a platform becomes too big. Then maybe it can turn into another form of monopoly, tyranny, and control. Now that's a valid point, but what we see so far is the exact opposite. Over the past 2 decades, there's been a lot of mobility in the platform economy. There were apps which were popular 10 years ago but are no longer there. And some people compare Uber to sweatshops in that they're exploitative of their workers. Now, that's amazing. Look, Uber can certainly be improved, but they're offering an option which didn't exist before, and no one is forced to become an Uber driver. The best way to curtail platform exploitation is to offer another platform which doesn't exploit. If their service is better, and if there was really exploitation before, then all the drivers would join the new platform, and that would drive out the abusive company. Government regulation is not the solution. Either way, I leave you with a super important observation that's worth memorizing. The mother of all evil is the concentration of power in any form in the hands of anyone, including platforms. The formula is the same. As long as platforms do not link themselves to the government for preferential treatment, as long as there's freedom of entry and exit into the industry, they will always be threatened by potential newcomers if they start turning into a monopoly. For that reason, the golden economic solution to any problem is competition. Whenever you see a problem, you can trace it to the concentration of power, which happens when there is a lack of competition. Take notes. I'm proud of you. You made it to the end, and thank you for your patience. Take a shot at these questions and try to use the concepts that you learned in today's lesson. Free trade and platform economy are two forms of competition as opposed to concentration of power. Platform economy is based on the network effect and economies of scale. Free trade allows division of labor, which is based on comparative advantage. And a form of free trade is outsourcing, and it's beneficial because it's a non-zero-sum game. Free trade means having no protectionism, such as tariffs. In this lesson, I would emphasize the platform economy as well as comparative advantage. So take a couple of minutes and do a concept map of yourself and try to make it unique. How would you answer the original scenario given what you learned today? So pause here and record your answers once again for these questions before I show you the sample answer. So one could say that this happens as a rational decision based on the expected benefit and alternatives available to them. The top-down solution could be shutting down the sweatshops or enforcing a living wage, but because of that, the children may end up in the streets and it may harm the weakest who lose their source of income. The market-driven solution could be more trade because specialization is a non-zero-sum game. And hereby ends this series of videos. Congratulations for finishing the economics of sex and drugs. Being in the class with students is a great pleasure for me. With these videos, I've deprived myself of it. I've been marginalized to a voice on the screen. Oh no, what have I done? I did this because I want my students to be autonomous learners who can stand on their own feet, learn in their own way, and go at their own pace. What I want you to take out of the course is the sensitivity to ask meaningful questions about incentives, sacrifices, and alternatives, and to realize that there is no free lunch and there are always unintended consequences. This is literally homework for life, and it starts with yourself. Every moment of your life is an application of opportunity cost. So pick your battle responsibly and stand by its consequences. Also, thank you very much for your effort over the past 3 months and for putting up with my lame jokes. Oh no! I hope you also appreciate the work that was put into making this series. Each video took me about 20 hours to make, and this doesn't include all the research of thousands of pages and not even the questions that pop up. Each slide took me about 1 hour. Now you might be like, what have you done? Yes, that's how I spend my vacation, and this is my way of saying how much I care about you. Remember signaling? You can also see it as an example of being passionate about one's work. Pick a professional career for yourself that you feel passionate about, for which you would be willing to work overtime and over the weekends, and which doesn't feel like work to you. That really makes a difference for yourself and for those around you. Farewell, my friends.